While you're thinking about moving to Virginia Beach or Norfolk and you're trying to compare and figure out which one is better for you, well, we're going to talk all about that today, and we're starting right now. Hey, my name is Sam Sansalone and I'm a real estate agent in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And if it's your first time, welcome. First of all, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification, but then that like button really helps tell the YouTube algorithm people that you like my video and it spreads the word. But today we're talking about Virginia Beach and Norfolk and which one makes the most sense for you to live in if you're moving to this area. Some people are moving to Virginia Beach or Norfolk because they work in each of those cities, but some people might decide that they might want to live in one and work in the other. So I want to do some pros and cons of each city and then also tell you about what is the cost difference between the house prices in one and the other, and if it's really worth it to work in one and live in a different city. We'll all go into school districts, we'll go into lifestyle, what's the vibe in these areas, you know, shopping, how far is a drive, like what's the environment like. Let's get into some statistics. The size of Virginia Beach is almost double the size of Norfolk. Norfolk is almost 250,000 people, but Virginia Beach is about 450,000. The values of property are lower oftentimes in Norfolk, so the median price in Norfolk is $194,800, but in Virginia Beach, that number is $285,400. So almost $100,000 difference in median property value in Norfolk and Virginia Beach. Now we'll compare median housing income as well. Median housing income in Virginia Beach is over $67,240 to be exact, but in Norfolk, it's just over $47,000. It's $47,137. So it's a stark contrast, $20,000 difference, which has an influence on the property values as well. So right off the bat, you're getting an idea of what the differences are living in Norfolk as opposed to living in Virginia Beach. So let's get into some specifics of these two cities. First of all, let's talk about neighborhoods. Well, what's the difference in feel and this the kind of styles of living? Well, in Virginia Beach, there's a lot of suburbs. Now, this area is huge. The city is really big. And a lot of neighborhoods got built in the 60s, the 70s, 80s, bigger to construction, lots of new construction even to now. Like there's plenty of building going on and still going on. But there's some drawbacks too. There are some cool little neighborhoods that are in the 60s and 70s and 80s that I like a lot, in the 90s too. But in addition to that, there are a lot of neighborhoods that kind of feel cookie cutter. So you don't really get any unique vibes that you might like that might be found in some parts of Norfolk and other cities. So now taking that and moving it to Norfolk, there are some nuances to Norfolk that are pretty cool. Like for instance, on the western side of Norfolk, there's lots of colonial style houses, craftsman style houses that are those older style that a lot of people like, and the property values over there are really high. They can start at 500,000 and go up to $1 million plus if you're on the water. So that whole side has a much higher property value than the rest of Norfolk. Now the rest of Norfolk has a little bit more, it's kind of meh. I mean, there are a lot of houses over here, more commercial, a lot of industrial areas, but there are a lot of houses built in the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Some smaller, 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Some Cape Cod, a lot of Cape Cod houses where it's like you got that first floor and a second floor, but the second floor has those cut-in ceilings, so when you go up the stairs, you see the rooms aren't necessarily as big as you might think they are because the ceilings are kind of smushed in. And there is new construction in Norfolk. In a lot of cases, these houses were built in pre-existing neighborhoods. So you see, as you drive through some of these neighborhoods, there are older houses and then little new construction, little places sprinkled in as much as builders could find places to build. So there's a stark contrast between many areas of Virginia Beach and many areas of Norfolk. But what I don't want to do is blanket each city and say that it feels the exact same way in the entire city, either Virginia Beach or Norfolk, because while there are different vibes to each one, there are some places where I could drive you through one part of Norfolk and drive into Virginia Beach and you won't realize you switched cities. But usually right as both of the cities connect. So otherwise, the further away you go, usually you can tell. But then you also have the option for country living. The lower third-ish of Virginia Beach is a lot of country and close to water, a lot of wildlife refuge. So if you do like the idea of farming, if you go down, the further south you go, the better options you have for that kind of a thing. Drawback is you're further away from the main town also, keep that in mind. But then you go over to Norfolk, it's more kind of city feel. It's not as suburbia as Virginia Beach by any stretch. Especially there's no real options for country. So if you want farmland, There are some real small spots where maybe a person owns a larger piece of land, but that's really about it. There's nothing really there for country vibes. But if you go into certain spots in the western Norfolk parts, Ghent, Larchmont, Lock Haven, anything on that west side, West Ghent too. There's lots of open, like grassy areas, nice trees. The houses are larger. Lots sometimes aren't as big, but you're getting a lot of house for the price. Even knowing that, the prices are pretty high, relatively speaking, because there's a scarcity for this type of housing, and it's close to a lot of things that are in high demand, like Ghent, the restaurants over there. And then if you go further north, like Old Dominion, Hampton Boulevard, there's on that far western side of Norfolk. All that whole area there is super in high demand and really nice. But the drawback there also is you have some flooding issues too. So just check for the flood zones for each house if you do plan on living in that area. But otherwise, there's some nuance to this area that's in really high demand that I personally like myself. But for the rest of Norfolk, it just doesn't really have the same thing. It's totally different. So keep in mind when someone says Norfolk, there are differences to parts of Norfolk. Now for Virginia Beach, the driving, now there's more driving, I would say personally, mile-wise and sometimes often time-wise if you're in Virginia Beach and stay in Virginia Beach. There's one interstate there, 264. Well, 264 kind of cuts in the middle of Virginia Beach. Well, if you go too far north or too far south, there are a lot of roads that connect between each other that have no real connection ever to the interstate. So you're doing a lot of driving in and amidst neighborhoods and through lots of developed areas, but it might take a while because there's lots of stoplights and stop signs and just plenty of driving. That can increase the transit time between where you live and where you work. It could take you 20-30 minutes to get from one side of the area to the other at least. Now for driving in Norfolk, not so much. It's a smaller city for one thing. You also have two interstates that connect through parts of the city, so you can get back and forth from one side to the other. There's 64 east and west that connects to the northeastern corner of the Norfolk Navy base, and it takes you about 10 or 15 minutes to get from the north and south areas of Norfolk on that interstate. However, the difference in this area is the traffic. The traffic can back up, especially in rush hour, so that 10 or 15 minutes can easily be 30 plus if you're at the wrong time. So factor that into your driving also. Now let's talk about school districts. Well, in Virginia Beach, these school districts are ranked. Look at greatschools.org, niche.com, other school rankings sites. Please, I'll drop the links below so you can do some research on schools yourself. But you can tell that these schools are ranked higher on those sites than most of the schools in Virginia. I mean, they're really ranked high. A lot of people ask me about coming to these areas because of the schools. Just because the school's ranked high does not mean that it's amazing or the best. There are some other schools that are great too. I would encourage you to just do some research and also read the reviews specifically about these schools to see why people rank them higher or lower. Now, if you go over to Norfolk, those are ranked lower. You'll see a stark contrast. Now, I will say that with the rankings, if you look at the high schools compared to the middle schools and the elementary schools, especially in Norfolk, you'll see that there are more options for higher ranked schools in the elementary schools and middle schools. If you see rankings that are lower, do some more research and dig deeper, and then see if maybe there are certain schools within those larger districts that you might like that are perfectly fine, because there's some great options in this city. But you want to do some research first to make sure you're aware of the pros and cons. Now beaches, they both have beaches, believe it or not. So Virginia Beach has four strong beaches. There's the north end and the ocean front that are on the eastern side of the coast. That's where most of the action happens, especially the ocean front. I mean, that's the touristy spot where all the hotels are. The north end is a lot quieter. People that are local love that area because there's dozens of side streets where you can get off and get into oceanfront or get into the beach and not have to see too many people if you don't like that kind of a thing. But then if you go down to the south of the ocean front, there's a place called Sandbridge that a lot of other locals like to go to also. That's south of the ocean front. And if you go north on the north coast in Chesapeake Bay is Chicks Beach. That is close to and almost borders Norfolk itself. That's the northwestern side of Virginia Beach. That's got its own community too, pretty cool. Now in the Norfolk side, the further you go into the Chesapeake Bay on the west, you'll see the Ocean View area. This area feels totally different than the beach areas of Virginia Beach. So some people love Ocean View. Some people do not like it at all. You'll notice that it does feel a whole lot different up there. Do some research again. I'd say the East Beach is a part of the Ocean View that is on the northeastern side of this section. That is a totally redeveloped area. As you go on the Ocean View coast, Some of these houses are, you know, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $1 million plus, because they're huge houses right on the water. That's demand, period, in and of itself. But as you get off of the beach, those houses drop significantly in price. They can be as low as $200,000 and less, sometimes depending on the condition and the location of that house. So there's plenty of streets down there. It's had a negative connotation in the past. It's kind of up and coming. I would say that there are some places that are good value over there if you like oceanfront and are open to it. But again, do your research and just be aware of that there's a stark contrast between this area and other areas of the beachfront in Virginia Beach. Now for shopping. Virginia Beach, there's plenty. For big box stores, malls, there's several malls, but you've got strip malls everywhere. Like I mentioned, the suburbs, you could live in a lot of places in Virginia Beach and have easy access to most of the essentials you're gonna need. But if you go over to Norfolk, Norfolk has that. There are strip malls, there are big box stores, there is all that, but there's much less of it. There is downtown Norfolk that has the MacArthur Center Mall, which is a nice mall, but there are stores that are leaving there, and because partially the malls in some places don't have as much leverage as they used to. They don't have as much staying power. You've got less grocery stores, less types of grocery stores, and sometimes you may end up driving from Norfolk to Virginia Beach to get to a specific store that you want. Now for downtown, they both have a downtown. I've talked about the downtown town center, which is Virginia Beach's downtown. It's a smaller downtown compared to downtown Norfolk. Town center has really nice stores, really nice restaurants, and is in the middle of Virginia Beach. However, it's just a smaller version. Now, if you go to downtown Norfolk, there's a lot more there. Businesses, stores. There's an area called Waterside, which is on the water, which has some nice restaurants, a nice big park called Town Point Parks and museums. Real nice over there, but it's a totally different vibe. Both of them are different. So depending on what you might like one over the other, but I will say that if you do live in one of these cities, you'll have access to one of these relatively easy. Now let's talk about crime for a second. You'll see, if you look on, I'll drop some resources for you to do some research on crime, but you'll notice that if you research crime in Virginia Beach and Norfolk, it's kind of all over the map, because a lot of Virginia Beach, you'll see that a lot of the areas have low crime, but it's not everywhere. Same goes with Norfolk. There are some places of Norfolk that are incredibly quiet. So I wouldn't just take one city and assume that it's either one way or the other. Do some research, and I'll drop those links below so you get an idea of what I'm talking about, and you'll see these stark contrasts. And my other suggestion is, when you look at crime, some places that have higher crime statistics, in those clusters of, like, some of those areas do like color coding, so you can see the areas that have the most condensed crime. Well, sometimes areas that have those condensed crime, the darker colors, look like that on the map, and so you're thinking, well, that neighborhood must be rough. Well, actually, sometimes the strip malls that are nearby or the convenience stores may have had crime in the past, and because that area is in the same spot as the neighborhood, they blanket it all together, and it looks like it's a bad spot, but it might not be. In addition to that, check the types of crime that are in these areas too, because not all crime might feel the same to you. Now, parks. This is a big question too. Virginia Beach has over 200 publicly funded parks in the entire city. So there's plenty of opportunities for parks. Large ones, small ones in the middle, Mount Trashmore's, the trash heap that is a landfill that is now one of the more popular parks in Virginia Beach. So there's plenty of options in Virginia Beach for outdoor stuff, wildlife stuff. Though, if you go into Norfolk, there's not as much there. There are some parks and some that are smaller and medium sized, but they're just not as frequent. So when you go into Norfolk, expect that. Expect the much lower frequency of outdoor activities. Now for housing prices. I want to take all this information and bring it down to, what's the value of living in one city or the other? So should I work and live in the same city, or should I commute from one to the other? Because there is a cost difference between living in one city and the other. Virginia Beach has a higher cost of living on average compared to that of Norfolk, but that's not always the case for every area. Let me explain. First of all, in Virginia Beach and Norfolk, if you saw a house in Norfolk that you liked, the same kind of house in Virginia Beach might cost you about $60,000 or $70,000 more, generally speaking. There are lots of nuances to this, but I'm just going to use this as an example. Most of Norfolk is generally priced less than Virginia Beach. So if you take that, say $65,000 as an example, if one area costs about $65,000 more than the other in Norfolk, give or take, every $1,000 of mortgage is about $6 to $7 a month. Let's just say $400 a month is going to cost you more to live in Virginia Beach as opposed to Norfolk for that same house. However, if you worked in Virginia Beach and lived in Norfolk, in order to save that $400, let's count the cost. The drive from Virginia Beach to Norfolk, on average, might cost you twice as much in gas as if you lived in the same city, as lived in Virginia Beach and worked in Virginia Beach. Let's say you liked the school district, but it was in a more expensive area. Well, let's say you're trying to save that money and you go to a different area. Let's say you move to Norfolk and you're saving $400. Well, let's say you're paying $100 more in gas. Now that $400 is now $300. Now you're counting the cost of what your lifestyle looks like. Well, maybe if you're in a school district that you don't like as much, or you're living in an area that you don't like as much, as an example, is that $300 savings worth it? Maybe you want to be closer to the beach, so you're giving that up to also save that money too. Is that worth it to you? Is the quality of life for driving an extra possibly 30 minutes or so in a car more every day is not worth it to you? Because that's 2.5 hours a week or 4 hours a week extra in the car. So that's another value that you're losing if you try and save that money. So I'm not saying that it's not worth it to be in either city. What I'm saying is it might be cheaper to live in parts of Norfolk and then commute into Virginia Beach, but there might be a cost to that you might have to factor in. A lot of Virginia Beach is a little bit more expensive than Norfolk, but it's not always the case. Sometimes in Virginia Beach, it's really a lot more expensive. And sometimes it's actually not. It's cheaper to live in Virginia Beach as opposed to living in parts of Norfolk. If you want to live in Western Norfolk, that cost of that living in that area can be $100,000 or more greater than living in Virginia Beach, give or take. So you might end up spending $400 or $500 more a month living in Western Norfolk as opposed to living in Virginia Beach in some places. So part of this is nuance, and so I don't want to blanket statement these things. So the biggest question is, what's best for you? Do you like the idea of living in Virginia Beach or the idea of living in Norfolk? There's so much nuance to it. If you have any more questions, let me know. Now, if you want to know more about Virginia Beach or Norfolk, I've got more videos here I'll show you if you have any more questions. And I have more resources in my channel if you have any more questions about neighborhoods or other things in this area. And I'll see you on the next video.